Good morning. I was sitting there with Pastor Dan, and when I thought she was about to announce the next president. I'm like, this is how I find out? I mean, a little heads up would have been nice. Good to be with you all this morning. In my role, I have the privilege of traveling all over and speaking to congregations or running seminars and conferences. And every time I have the privilege of being part of a faith community, I'm also struck that I'm part of a faith community and I'm not with them today. So on behalf of Uptown Covenant Church in one of the most diverse neighborhoods in Chicago, and my pastor, Jeremy Falk, I greet you in the name of Jesus from brothers and sisters in Chicago serving in Uptown. So again, they're meeting right now. And again, I count it a privilege to be able to be around, but I also miss my faith community as well when I'm gone. So, a little bit, again, Jeriah is teaching me a new program here. So if I get into someone's bank account, I'll call it a good morning. Let's see, is there stuff on the screen there? There we are, good. Hey, a lot of people say, Covenant Ministries of Benevolence. Before I get into the lesson, I'm going to take you through, because my background, believe it or not, is in Old Testament and rabbinical thought. So you can see there's a straight line from that to running hospital and stuff like that. It's just a straight line. So I'm going to take you on a little journey in a very familiar passage. But again, just a little bit about Covenant Ministries of Benevolence. People say, what exactly do you guys do? And I found this video that goes, this captures what we do.
This man right here is my great-grandfather. He's the first cat herder in our family.
Herding cats. Don't let anybody tell you it's easy.
Anybody can herd cattle. Holding together 10,000 half-wild short hairs, well, that's another thing altogether.
Being a cat herder is probably about the toughest thing I think I've ever done.
I got this one this morning, right here, and if you look at his face, it's just ripped to shreds,
You see the movies, you hear the stories, I'm living a dream. Not everyone can do what we do.
I wouldn't do nothing else.
It ain't an easy job, but when you bring a herd into town and you ain't lost a one of them, ain't a feeling like it in the world.
Now, if someone asks you what does CMB do, you have a visual, so you know what it is. At its most simplest, CMB is where faith initiatives and public funding meet. So, a bunch of, that gets kind of dicey. But again, faith initiatives that drive things, but over time, they are funded publicly now by state, municipal, and federal dollars. And that comes with a whole host of responsibilities and obligations. So where those things meet, we tend to be the organization that oversees them. We run parallel with the denomination. And that means we have a number of things that are in our family of ministries. You've heard alluded to Covenant Living, which is 11 retirement communities from Seattle to Florida, from New Hampshire to San Diego, and everywhere in between. They are in the top 10, one of the top 10 largest in the nation. EMC Health Foundation, formerly Turlock, Emmanuel Medical Center, is now an EMC Health Foundation that does innovations for rural medicine, grants and things like that to incentivize and help with rural medicine, as well as Jessica's House, a wraparound grief center for children who have had loss, any kind of death or loss that they've experienced, to Edelbrook, which is a full-service K through from cradle to grave in Connecticut for children that started out with autism, severe autism. They have contracts with every school district in the state of Connecticut, and the most severe kids with autism or behavioral come to that school, and they have from cradle to grave services. Again, an incredible kind of thing out there. And then we have Covenant Initiatives for Care, but underneath that is really what we call Covenant Ability Network. Those are homes for adults with special needs that we have in Illinois, Michigan, and Minnesota, as well as in Connecticut. So again, our family of ministries is pretty encompassing and pretty broad, from children all the way up to, we take from literally cradle to grave in our ministries. And I have the privilege in my role to work with these 5 individuals that are the presidents and CEOs of each of these. My job is to work with them on risk assessment and mitigation, long-term strategic planning, coaching and development, and then interdisciplinary work between these various agencies. For example, right now, do you realize that our adults with disabilities, we have our oldest resident right now is 71 with disabilities. Remember, when these homes were started, the average age was not anywhere near the 70s. In fact, Down syndrome, when I was born, you would die somewhere in your 20s. Now our oldest resident with Downs is 71. And so we have a new issue that's running, and we have our Covenant Living Retirement Committees working with our disabilities to say, what do you do now when you have the complications of a disability overlaid with the complications of aging? So we have a really unique place that we're working here. What that means by the numbers, that doesn't sound impressive enough, Todd, so you hang out with 5 people. But here's what it comes down to. That means we have over 4,300 employees, over 10,250 residents and students that we serve throughout the country. We have over 325 full-time equivalent regulars. That means there's more than 325 that work with us regularly. We're in 11 states coast to coast, and we are regulated by over 350 agencies. State, municipal, federal. That means I can tell you right now, and I can say this with all conviction and truth, somewhere one of our entities is being audited by someone for something about something. And it's not like churches. Someone can walk in and say, we're here for 3 days to audit your books, and you don't have the right to say, it's not convenient. So this is what we do. We oversee that side, or that parallel side of the denomination where faith initiatives and public funding meet. For a denomination our size, we're quite tiny, quite frankly. In the world of evangelicalism, we're a very small denomination, which is why we are the mice that roared when it comes to this kind of stuff. We're boxing way above our weight class here. And I always say, we are the mouse that roared, which also means we must remember at all times, we're still just a mouse. And you got to remember that. And so again, that's what Covenant Ministry Benevolence is before we get to the lesson here. And that QR code, if you want, downloads a history booklet if you want to see it. It gives a little more detail about who we are. And you can see part of this movement you are a part of in a local expression. This mosaic of mission-minded people started with immigrants walking around Chicago, seeing need, elderly, orphaned, and the sick. And they bought a three-floor house. And they put the sick on the first floor, the elderly on the second floor, and the orphans on the third, and said, we're going to do what we can, where we can, with whatever we can to help those that most need. And that is what God blesses. In fact, at C&B, we use this phrase, outreach without expectation. Service is the best expression of your faith. And you know what? Just keep your mouth shut and do good work, and God will be glorified. We're not out to win arguments, we're out to win people. And the way you win people is you care for them, you extend them dignity, and if they have need, you meet it, no questions asked. And that is Jesus at his best. And so when you do that, mice start to roar. So now there's really no easy transition, but I said my background is in Old Testament and rabbinical thought. And so I'm going to take you on a little I'm a teacher at heart. And so what happens is, with teachers, the idea here is, well, let me back it up. Frustration comes from expectations not met. Agreed? Good. So my hope is not to frustrate you. And if I do, it's Pastor Dan's problem. So that's right. That's right. I saddle up and I leave this town. So frustration comes from expectations not met. So I need to clarify the expectations early. My job as a teacher is to take a passage that's very familiar to you, and this one will be familiar to you, lift it up, turn it ever so slightly so you see it from a new angle, and that should unlock new understanding, new revelations, hopefully new transformation. So this morning, you might encounter some new concepts and different perspectives and interpretations of a very familiar passage. And for some of you today, you're going to go, that's a breath of fresh air. That is rain on a desert, what he's saying. And for others, you're going to go, is heresy still a thing? Can we string them up? Can we burn them? You may feel angry. You may want to bring me up on heresy charges. It wouldn't be the first time. You may feel angry. You see, I've spent my career in all kinds of, when I was I was a public school principal in the Denver public schools for a while. And I used to tell my parents, if your child is getting straight A's, we're not challenging them enough. If they're getting straight F's, we're challenging too much. Your kids should be definitively C level and dissonant the whole time. Otherwise, we're failing. So my job is to make you uncomfortable. And I'm really good at it. Followers of Jesus Christ desire to mature in their faith. True? This is interactive, folks. True? All right, good. Such a journey, by definition, and within my own spiritual journey, is one of discomfort and dissonance, and that's how I know we are growing. All right, with that, shall we begin the journey on this passage together? Yeah? All right. Remember, the Bible assumes you know a lot more than you do. The Bible assumes you know a lot more than you do. Hey, folks, 150 years from now, people will not know the difference between a butt dial and a booty call, and that is a big difference. Right? Some of you look confused. Ask your neighbor, all right? But they will not know the difference. In fact, I'll tell you what, there are some people sitting here right now. When I say the word 9/11, you will have a very different reaction than someone sitting next to you. For some of us, when you say 9/11, sights, sounds, smells, where I was at that exact moment come to life, and I can feel it right now. For some of you going, is that like 7-Eleven's sister stores? 9/11? All right, so you have to do some work here because the Bible assumes you know a lot more than you do. And we're 2,000 years removed from when we gathered the New Testament. So we got to work hard, and we got to better understand the customs, the traditions, the theology, the culture of the biblical era. And then you realize when we do that, there's a lot more to the story. And I'll tell you what, it is good to know the whole story because if you don't, things like this happen.
Hey, kids. You got to get down. Come on.
See, you need to know the whole story. All right? I know we got some runners out here, so while we're at it, let's take a look at this one. It is important to know the whole story. And so we're going to go after the whole story of a particular passage today, and it's going to be Matthew 16. Now, let's start. It's going to move in three movements here. We're going to talk about keys. We're going to talk about gates. All right, so far? And then we're going to follow Jesus' the field trip that he took his disciples on. And then he asked them a question, who do you say I am? And the Bible assumes you know all about where he asked that question, because it's just as important. So the Bible assumes you know. So there's going to be three movements. You with me? Good. All right. Keys. Let's talk about keys. A city being attacked in biblical times was quite common for the era. And I'll tell you what, depending on the city's importance, really determined how often it was attacked. For example, El Megiddo, that city, has over 23 layers of destruction that we know of. All right? 23 layers. That means in that particular era, that city was attacked and laid siege 23 times because we have that many layers. And it was not uncommon in biblical times for one person in a major city to experience anywhere between 2 or 3 sieges in their lifetime because those cities sat on trade routes and water supplies. And in a desert, trade routes and water supplies are crucial. So far, so good? All right, so therefore, these fortified cities had huge walls. That became the order of the day. And still, people needed to be able to access and the safety of the city's walls and still get out for farming and trade. And so they had to make gates in these walls. They also made these gates also the most vulnerable part of a wall, right? Because a wall is great and it's very defensible if there's no gates to it. You also will die in there. So you need some gates to get in and out, but it made it vulnerable. How high do you think these gates were? Take a guess for the biblical era. Anybody? Be brave. 12 feet? 30 feet? They were, on average, depending on the city, they were about 18 to 28 feet high. Doesn't seem too tall, right? Average height at the time was about 5'6", 5'7", so that might tell you something too. All right? So if you're short like me, that was the era we should have lived in. Depending on the size of the city, there could be anywhere from 2 to 8 gates. All right? Now, there was no There was no sophisticated tumbler system to the keys to these gates like we have today, you know. There was no sophisticated tumbler that they didn't have a master key for all the gates. In fact, each gate had its own unique key that would work on only that gate. Now, each key, how big do you think these keys were? Yeah, somebody said like this. Now, obviously, you're a fisherman. Oh, yeah, it was like that size. Yeah. Whatever. Actually, they're about 2 to 3 feet. Yeah, put that in your pocket. About 2 to 3 feet. These are huge gates. These are huge keys. Imagine carrying around if you were part of a six-gated city, you had 6 of those keys that you had to carry around. Now, the person that was entrusted with these keys in biblical times were people of great responsibility. They were selected and trusted with a great deal of responsibility. And it's pretty straightforward. Why? Why do you think that would be the case? That's right. That means if they didn't lock it up at night, if you were an enemy, hey, thanks for leaving it open. It's like your garage door, only with a lot bigger implications. All right? And if you didn't open it in the morning, trade couldn't happen, commerce couldn't happen. So the keeper, the keeper of the keys, became an exalted position. These individuals carried a great deal of responsibility. And fun fact, remember, because you want to impress people at your next cocktail dinner, remember we said these keys were anywhere from 2 to 3 feet in length, right? And you could have anywhere from 2 to 8 of these keys. The key keeper carried them by wrapping them together, then throwing them over his shoulder. Have you ever heard the phrase shouldering responsibility? There it is. Go ahead, dazzle people next time you have them all together. So the point being is this: if you were the key keeper, all right, the individual to whom the keys of the city were entrusted, to a certain degree you were responsible for the rise and the fall of the city, or the kingdom, if you will, was in their hands. So the responsibility of the rise and fall, the security of the city, the kingdom was in the hands of the key keeper. We good on keys? Take those keys section, put it right here for a second. We're going to come back to it, all right? Now, let's talk about gates. Because the gates were the weakest part of any city wall, and thus the city's overall defense, a science emerged around making gates into these major cities. In fact, many of the chambers of the gates were used for administrative purposes during the time of peace. And each of these chambers were a mini gate. Now, so what you're looking up here is, you can see those 8 chambers, like the arrow's pointing at one of them. There's 8 of them there. That's built during the time of Solomon. Here's another one that you can impress people with. This is an 8-chamber Solomonic gate. Yeah, ooh, everybody said. So, now, those 8 chambers during peacetime were used for administrative purposes, taxes, tariffs, coming in and out, things like that, registering. And then you can see, like, there would be a gate right at the top there where that arrow is, between those 2 chambers at the top. There'd be a gate there. There'd be another gate at the next one, another gate at the next one, another gate at the next one, and then a main gate at that other one. So a lot of mini gates before you got to the main gate. Now, what would happen is, if there was a siege, if there was an attack, you would be able to, you have to get through that little gate, but on those little administrative areas, there were rooftops. And so as your soldiers that were defending were killed, you could drop more soldiers down into those administrative chambers and keep fighting. And the idea being, you would hope to sort of bloodlet the attacking army before they got to the main gate as they were attacking. Each of those little chambers became ways to keep dropping your soldiers down to fight, to kind of hopefully deter them before they got through. In fact, even the way the ramp would come up to a gate was important. So, for example, how many of you? Can I come on the floor with a microphone? I could. Good. And now you guys are going, he's coming down. No. So even like a gate, if say this is the gate to the city, all right? They would make the ramp so that it would come up. Basically, it would come up this way from the right side to the left, and then you'd have to go up to the gate that way. Now, why would they do that? Battering rams? Let me give you a clue. How many of you are righties in this room? How many of you are lefties in this room? Lefties, hang in with me. The Bible has given us a wrong deal, but I'm about to flip that on its head, all right? Here's why. If you are carrying a sword, it goes in your right hand, right? Which means your shield's in your left. So if you built the ramp up this way, Guess what? If they were to walk frontwise, they're exposed. So they had to turn and back up the thing. And as they're backing up, there was a wall over here, and guess what was over there? People with arrows. And by the way, the reason why lefties get a raw deal is because they were the lefties. Be ready. Because again, the Bible, when you read it, says, and he was a lefty. Like that was a bad thing. Yeah, it's not a bad thing. They were special forces. They were. Here's why. Because if you're right-handed, right, your sword goes on your left hip. That's where your scabbard is. But if you're lefty, it's reverse. And so do you remember I think it's in Judges, Ehud, when the guy sneaks in and it says he stabs him? Because he was, and it says, and he was a lefty. Like that's a bad thing. He was special forces. They didn't frisk him good enough because where would his scabbard be? On the other side. So he just put a little knife in there. They frisked him on the right side, assuming he was righty. And so he got close enough to stab him. So lefties, tonight, if anybody looks down on you, just go, you have no understanding. I am special forces of the biblical era. Tell them that. Tell them that. And then they'll step slowly back from you. All right. Now, so that's the whole science behind it. And so if this attack was happening, and here's, think this through, and if they're pounding the gate, and finally the attacking army says, no more, we're leaving. They back off, and the way they would record it is, our gates prevailed. In fact, we have all kinds of writings in antiquity where we went on, blah, 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 and the gates did not prevail, meaning we won. Or they went somewhere and they would say, we tried, but the gates prevailed, meaning they lost. If the gates win, guess what? It keeps the attackers out. And the Bible assumes you know that. So, with that said, think about that. For the gates to prevail, it means it wasn't penetrated by the attackers. The gates kept them out. Those on the offense were turned back if the gate prevails. All right? The Bible assumes you know that. We good with gates? Take gates, put that right here. We got the keys, we got the gates, right? All right, hold on to that. Because now it's going to come together in a beautiful moment of fusion. And you're going, God, I hope so. So, now let's look at today's text based on that background that the Bible assumes you know about that, all right? So, let's take this very familiar passage. One day Jesus said to his disciples, let's cross to the other side of the lake. So they got in a boat and started out, and they sailed across. Jesus settled down for a nap, but soon a fierce storm came down on the lake. The boat was filling with water, and they were in real danger. Now, hold that thought, because that Matthew one, in the 6 or 7 days prior to that Matthew, that where they're crossing the lake, what happens when they cross the lake, we're going to get from Luke, all right, and then we're going to come back to the Matthew text, because it encompasses about 7 days, and Jesus takes his disciples on a little field trip before Matthew 16. Now, the Bible assumes you know this, all right? So, when he says going over to the other side, what this means in biblical times is he's going over to, you see where that, it's hard to see, but that top red line up there, they're crossing over from basically Capernaum to that other, like a southeasternly kind of way. And they're landing over there. And that doesn't sound like a big deal, but it's going to be a big deal when you know the name of that place. And for a good Jew following Jesus, they're going to go, yeah, let's go somewhere else. All right? Now, what you need to know where they're crossing, this is called Mount Arbel. It is one of the highest places right by the Sea of Galilee. Now, that in and of itself is no big deal, but you got to know that Mount Arbel is the last stop from a line of mountains that run from the Mediterranean Sea to the Sea of Galilee. And so if you look at this map, what you'll see is you can see this valley where those arrows are. And so I've been on Mount Arbel. When the wind from the Mediterranean comes off the sea, goes into that valley, and then hits the Sea of Galilee. What happens when you take a lot of something, cram it into a little tube, and force it through? It gains in force. I have been sitting on Mount Arbel, and as God is my witness, I used to take people there on trips when I was a Bible teacher at a college, and I've seen it go from crystal, just glass, to 3 to 4 foot waves in 5 to 10 minutes, just boom. because the way the wind comes off the Mediterranean, funnels into that valley, hits the water, and then up come the waves. So, the Bible assumes you know that little phenomena that can happen. Now, let's really get into it. So Jesus gets in the boat, they're crossing the lake. Back in 1986, there was a drought, and the Sea of Galilee went so low that they actually found a first century boat in the sand, and that's what it looks like. So they actually found this. So we actually have the dimensions now of what a first century boat looked like. In fact, the artist's reconstruction has it looking like that. Now, here's where it gets really fun, because the Bible assumes you know this. And I'm going to need 12 of you to come forward right now. Like this is actual participation. Let's see how brave Hillside is. Or we're going to stand here awkwardly for a long time, so it's in your best interest. All right, so I need you to, let's pretend this is the back of the boat, folks, this stair. So you got to come on this side of the stairs. All right, and come on, we're not even close. Okay, this is 4. I'm a principal. If you add 8, you get 12. So come on, keep coming up here. Keep coming up here. We're slowly getting there. Slowly getting there. How do we got here? You got to come on this side, ma'am. Come on this side. How many get here? Man, Pastor Dan, you got to get these guys courageous. All right. Actually, you're going to have to come on the other side of me because I'll be the bow of the boat. All right. So come on this side of me. How many we got here, folks? 4 more. Wow. The awkwardness begins. There we go. 1, 2. Come on this side of the stairs, though. You got to come on this side of the stairs, but not on the other side of me. You got to stay on this side of me. All right. Come on up here. Come on up here. On this side of the stairs. So that means you got to crawl a second row here. Maybe, yeah, like the boat will come out to about here. All right. So there we are. Now, folks, do we have 12? Do we have 12? 13? We have 13. Baker's dozen. We'll run with it. All right. You got a problem here. All right, you got a real. Now, this is how many people were in the boat. Now, think about this for a second. Where would the water line on this boat be? Yeah, it'd be sitting pretty low. Now, granted, about 5'6", 5'7", so we're all a little more beefier than that. But the bottom line is, the boat would be sitting low in the water, right? The Bible assumes that when he said he loaded up 12 people into a boat, you guys would be like, yeah, that's a safety concern. All right, thank you all. Can you give the disciples a hand? Oh, there we go. Now that you know all that stuff, now that you know about the topography and what will happen when wind hits it and the boats, their sizes, the water line, everything the Bible assumes that you know, let's read that passage again. One day, oh, is that it? There it is. One day, Jesus said to his disciples, let's cross to the other side of the lake. So they got into a boat and started out. By the way, remember, only a couple of them were fishermen. The rest of them were definitively landlubbers. All right? So he's like, hey, let's go in the boat. And 2 of them were like, cool. And the other one's like, yeah, let's go around. All right? As they sailed across, Jesus settled down for a nap, but soon a fierce storm came down on the lake, and the boat was filling with water, and they were real in danger. If you knew all that context, you'd go, oh, I know what happened. They should have checked the weather first, you know? The disciples went and woke him up, shouting, Master, Master, we're going to drown. When Jesus woke, he rebuked the wind and the raging waters. Suddenly the storm stopped, and all was calm. Then he asked them, where's your faith? And the disciples were terrified and amazed. Who is this man, they asked. When he gives a command, even the wind and the waves obey him. And so they arrived in the region of the Gerasenes. That's how, when I draw that map, I said where they're going. That's how we know where they were going. To the Gerasenes, across the lake from Galilee. So that's what's going on there, and the Bible assumes you know that. Now think Jewishly. What might be going through the disciples' mind when you read 8:25, he spoke, and then all was calm? Is there any place where you can think of where water and chaos is happening, and then there's a word spoken, and then calm and order comes? Genesis. So if you're a Jewish disciple, you're going to go, wait a minute. He spoke, and order comes out of chaos? They're thinking this already. They're thinking this already. And by the way, water simultaneously for Jewish culture is life-giving. It's something that gives life. It's also a sign of chaos, turmoil, evil. It could be both. So when he said, let's go over to the lake, let's go on the other side, and they're in the boat, and then the waves hit, you know they're going, this is why we didn't want to do this. And then Jesus goes, oh, there's chaos? There's chaos? I speak, and order comes out of chaos. And they go, who is this man? That's why that line is so important. Who is this that speaks and calm and order comes out of this? Because there's only one other place that happens in the Jewish experience, and that's Genesis. There's only one other place where a word is spoken and the water's calm, and out of that comes. Now, the reason the Gerasenes was so important is it also goes by another name in that biblical time. It's called the Decapolis, is where the Gerasenes are. Now, the interesting thing is the Decapolis might tip you off a little bit about what that region's like. What might that region be? Is it a good Jewish neighborhood? No, Deca, that means Greek. The city of 10. There's a lot of Greek people living over there. Well, not Greek people, but not Jewish. The kind of people where, so when he says, hey, let's go to the other side, he goes, great, let's go to the Gerasenes. And like, that's not what we meant. And so they go over to the other side, to the Gerasenes, that everyone knows is where the non-clean, the non-Jewish live. And this is where things get to be really fun. They arrive in the Gerasene district. This is the land that is the stronghold of the pagan ideals, and for all practical purposes symbolizes, embodies for the Jew complete evil, complete everything you don't want to be. And Jesus goes, let's go there. Called the Decapolis. Now, the funny thing is they get to the Decapolis, and guess what happens? The mayor comes out. Jesus was climbing out of the boat. A man who was possessed by demons came out to meet him. And the Jews are going, I knew it. Out comes the mayor, possessed by demons. And not only is he possessed by demons, he's naked. For Jews, this is getting worse. I almost died in the water. All right? We go to the Gerasenes, which we know is not good. A demon-possessed naked guy comes out. And guess where he used to live? In a graveyard. It doesn't get any worse for a Jew. Well, pork sandwiches would have made it to home, but still. These guys are going, we knew this would happen. Thanks a lot, Jesus. And it goes even worse. As soon as he saw Jesus, this demon-possessed guy shrieks out and falls down in front of him and screams, why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High? Please, I beg you, don't torture me. For Jesus had already commanded the evil spirit to come out of him. This spirit had often taken control of the man. Even when he was placed under guard and put in chains and shackles, he simply broke them and rushed out into the wilderness, completely under the demon's power. And then Jesus strikes up the conversation. What is your name? And Legion, he replied, for he was filled with many demons. The demons kept begging Jesus to not send them into the bottomless pit or Sheol. I'm going to pause there for a second. For Jews, Jews have a very different definition of hell than we do. For them, the definition of hell is the one place where God willingly withdraws his presence, because God can be everywhere. So God chooses to withdraw his presence. And they name that place Sheol, or the pit, or the underworld. This is where God willingly withdraws his presence. And again, the Bible assumes you know this. And guess what the demon asks him not to do? Does it strike you as odd that even the demon is saying, don't put me in the place that doesn't have your presence? Even the demon is saying that. Now, if you're a disciple watching this, your world is being rocked right now. And Jesus obliges. He says, okay, there happened to be a large herd of pigs. I take it back. There were pork sandwiches. All right? There's a herd of pigs. Not one pig, a whole herd of them. A herd of pigs, a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby. The demons begged him, let them enter the pigs. So Jesus gave them permission. And then in a wonderful circular event, the demons came out of the man, entered the pigs, and the entire herd plunges down the hillside into the water, the abyss for Jews, and drowns. You see the circular kind of, the Bible assumes you know all of that. How many of you knew any of that? The Bible assumes you knew it. Do you see how this comes to life now when you know all these things? So, with that said, let me see here. We do know this. I stuck this slide in here last moment because I was going to gauge how well you guys were engaged, and you're engaged, so I'm going to do it. This interesting thing, so he said, the man begs to go with Jesus, and Jesus says, no, go back to your family and tell them everything God has done for you. So he went through the towns proclaiming the great things Jesus had said and done. I was mentored by a rabbi for 2 years, and so I got a lot of Jewish history, and especially biblical era history. There was a surge of synagogues in that region at that same time. Now, there's no direct connection, but I think this guy goes around and says, do you just know what happened? And all of a sudden, these synagogues start popping up in the Decapolis. And I think there's just an interesting, again, no way to prove it, but pretty interesting coincidence, if you ask me. Now, all that is going on, and Jesus says, you know what? Now it's time to, let's go to Caesarea Philippi. And that's where we pick up our text today, Matthew 16, because that's the first 6 days before this text. Everything that just happened happens in about the 6 days before he goes to Caesarea. And he goes, let's go to Caesarea Philippi. And you go, oh, that's interesting. If you're a Jew, you go, seriously? Seriously? Well, here's why. Caesarea Philippi is home to a pagan fertility cult and home to the god Pan, the god of the flocks and the field. Pan was the god that emerged from among the Greek fertility gods, and these gods ultimately find their roots in a certain individual that we heard about in the Old Testament called Baal. Now, Pan is the modern biblical manifestation of Baal. And by the way, the disciples knew that. So when Jesus said, let's go to Caesarea Philippi, they were like, you've got to be kidding me. And he's like, nah, this will be fun. Loose translation. And so they went to Pan, and there it was this fertility cult. You can see, even today, you see the niches that were there for the fertility cult. And then also, the really interesting thing about, it's now called Benai, but this place, you see that cave there? All right, that was in Caesarea Philippi, that cave. And there was a temple to Pan put in front of it. In fact, there's a river that's running through right in front of that cave there. There was actually an earthquake about 35 years ago, 35 years ago, that shifted the water. That river was actually had a tributary coming out of the cave into that river, but now it doesn't anymore. So now think like a Jew. What does this place look like to you? It's evil. It's the worst you could think of. It's the place where the modern version of Baal is. There's a cave to the underworld, Sheol. There's water coming out of it from the pit, all right? And this is where Jesus says, hey, let's hang out. If you're a disciple, you're going, this can't get any worse, and it does. In fact, here's the artist's rendition of what it might have looked like. So Jesus takes them here, and this is where we pick up Matthew 16. And again, when Jesus says they went to Caesarea Philippi in Matthew, he assumes the Bible assumes you knew all this about Caesarea. Assumes you knew it. So now let's read the text today. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, and you guys go, oh, the place where Pan, modern day Baal, that's where the cave with the water coming out of hell. Yeah, that place. You knew that. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do people say the Son of Man is? Well, they replied, some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, and others say Jeremiah. Yeah, let's just cover our bases, or some other prophet. Then Jesus asked them, that's great, who everybody else thinks, but I'm going to ask you something else. Who do you say I am? Who do you say I am? And what Jesus is getting at there is, he's saying, we just took a field trip together. Remember when I said, let's go to the other side? We took a little field trip together. And now we're standing in front of the gates of hell, and I'm going to ask you a question. Who am I? And they got all that background. And it's fun how Jesus is going, let's ask. Who do you say I am? Then Simon Peter, the impulsive one, all right, you win. You're the Messiah. You get it. You're the Son of the living God. And Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of John, because my Father in heaven has revealed this to you, and you did not learn this from a human being. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not overcome it." Oh, does that remember the keys and the gates? Oh, it's getting good now. "And I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." For our Catholic brothers and sisters, they hold that this instituted the papal line, that Peter became the first pope, and then they maintain that meticulously. For those of us in the Protestant tradition or the evangelical church, we believe that this is when the church is built on Peter's confession of faith and his acknowledgement of Jesus as the Messiah. And therefore, we conclude that Jesus' statement is one of inclusiveness. We are all part of the established church, what the evangelicals, or including the evangelical church, refers to as the priesthood of all believers. That if you profess Jesus, you are now part of that line that was started at the gate of hell when Jesus said, "Who are you? Who am I?" But I want to get on that verse 18, though. The gates of hell will not overcome it. The gates of hell will not overcome it. I've heard this passage preached probably 18 times in my career. Always. So don't worry. The gates will protect us, folks. I've always heard it preached that way. But think about gates. We learned about it. If a gate wins, what happens? The attackers are kept out. This is the gate of hell. And Jesus is standing with his disciples after that field trip and said, guess what? And the gates of hell won't prevail. Who's moving toward the gate? Jesus and his disciples. I've heard it preached backwards my whole career. We are going into hell. And Jesus is going, and the gate that is there to stop us will not prevail. It won't stop us. I'll tell you what, you want to perk someone up when you're doing evangelism, go, you know, if someone ever tells you, let me put it this way, I might get in trouble here, Pastor, but this is your problem. Next time someone tells you to go to hell, go, I am, and Jesus has taken me. And you know what? You will have a whole new conversation. Right? Go, I am. You know, my wife always says, that one verse that you're about to say, don't, and I just did. So I hope she's not watching. So I want you to know something here. These disciples, what they thought, suddenly shifted on this trip. Everything they believed about being a good, devout, faithful Jew was rattled. Their world was rocked. It was like the ground was shaking underneath them. Everything must have felt like it was falling apart under the feet of these devout, pious Jews. You have to remember, folks, that to date, their faith was one that was cloistered around not contaminating their purity. It was homogeneous, made up of people that were generally the same ethnic background, that looked and thought and acted to a large degree like them. Only Jews were allowed in certain parts of the temple. To maintain cleanliness, they would actually ostracize and cast out people, women that were unclean. They were obligated publicly to walk and say, unclean, and shout that so that you wouldn't be near them. If someone was unclean, their shadow couldn't touch them or it would make them unclean. This is the environment, the faith understanding that they grew up with. But in roughly 6 days, Jesus took them on a field trip that included almost everything that they had been taught to meticulously avoid. It involved it all. In front of what symbolized the gate of hell, Sheol itself, Jesus declares, and the church is going to be built in places like that. Let's go. Talk about shifting ground, thinking in a new way, uncomfortable ways, shocking different ways. It had to feel wrong to them. This is wrong. And Jesus went, let's go to hell. From its inception, our text teaches us this. shifting ground and thinking in new and uncomfortable ways was and remains the norm for the church. The way Jesus might take the church today, and I tell you what, if you believe that we're going back to the old days as a church, your church is on a trajectory to die. The ground is shifted and is shifting. There are trends out there that have nothing to do with whether or not the covenant has good theology or bad theology, whether or not the covenant is good or bad, or whether we're good people or not, or whether we're too Swedish or not Swedish enough. It has nothing to do with it. These trends are happening, and the church will be reshaped. And I tell you what, Jesus is in the middle of it, if we'll see it. Jesus is in the middle of this going, we're having a great time, aren't we? And most of us are going, I knew this would happen. That's the camp I don't want to be in. But from its inception, shifting ground and new ways of thinking was the norm for the church. And the way that Jesus might take the church today might be shockingly different than it currently is, and it might take us in places we never thought of or dreamed of or imagined. And to tell you what, it might even feel like this isn't right. This feels wrong. Yet I'm telling you, that biblical example, you cannot tell me that those disciples weren't us. Going, this is crazy. And Jesus, I get this image of Jesus because I believe in the unbridled Jesus. When you unleash him, all kinds of things happen. Mice roar. Tiny denominations do big things. And I think, I'll say this to you. There are some of you going, he's so pessimistic about the church. Oh, no, I'm not. I am quite optimistic about the church. But I just don't think it's going to look like what we think. That's where we part company. I have no doubt Jesus is Jesus, and I have no doubt the church will prevail. I just think the church will look very different in 5 years. And the only question is, are we going to be a holdout? Or are we going to be getting in the boat and riding across the lake going, oh my God, hey, wait, he is God. That's what's at stake right now, people. That's what's at stake. And so, I just want to leave you with this. If anything I said today is ringing true, then it would mean that like the disciples, I would commend you. Because you know, if that's ringing true somewhere in here, that you know the church that Jesus is about to take the church places it probably does not want to go. If you're feeling something here that you go, man, there's some truth to this. I'm telling you that Jesus is about to take us into a season that's going to stretch our thinking to include the now unimaginable. If you're feeling that right here, going, there's something here, then that means you know Jesus is about to reshape the way we think, the way we do church. I'll tell you, I'll leave you with this last thought. Jews do not divide up the world between the holy and the evil, which is what we do as evangelicals. Between the good and the bad, right? In fact, if we don't understand something, we usually ascribe morality to it, not a lack of understanding. We count it bad, we put morality on it. Jews divide up the world between the holy and the not yet holy because there's nothing that God cannot touch. Nothing. So they'll never divide it between, like we do, good and evil. It'll be between the holy and the not yet holy. And I'll tell you what, that's a boat I want to get into. That's a boat I want to go across the lake in. That's the boat I want to meet the mayor of the Decapolis. That's the one that chases a herd of pigs into the water. That's the one that goes to the gate of hell. And my Lord goes, you ready to go in? I want to be like, yes. Where are you taking us, Jesus? Let me pray as the worship team comes up as we conclude our time. Lord Jesus, as we unpacked your message today, your passage, I think it was interesting. You said, Jesus replied, blessed are you, Simon Peter. But we fast forward 2,000 plus years. And Jesus, can we hear the words, blessed are you. Blessed are you, Hillside Covenant Church. Blessed are you, Hillside Covenant. For this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are the rock. And on this church, on this rock, I'm going to build this church. And I'll tell you what, church, the gates of hell, it's not going to stop us. Lord Jesus, I commend my brothers and sisters here to the season and journey that's ahead of us, wherever you take us. Even though it will feel like the ground is shifting underneath us. But from its inception, that was the norm. So we commit ourselves to you now in the name of Jesus. Amen.